There is something happening right now that you don't fully see yet, but they feel it. The moment you stopped chasing, something inside them shifted in a way they were not prepared for. And here's the part no one tells you. When you become calm, when you stop reaching, when you finally return to yourself, you don't lose them. You become the one thing they can no longer ignore. Before anything else, there is something you need to hear clearly. What you felt between you and this person was not something you imagined. It was not something created out of loneliness or wishful thinking. You were not too emotional, and you were not reading too much into things. The confusion you experienced did not come from nothing. It came from a connection that existed, but was never fully acknowledged in a direct way. And perhaps the most difficult part of this experience was not the feeling itself, but the sense that you were the only one aware of it, that you were carrying something real while they moved as if nothing had happened, as if everything was casual, undefined, or uncertain. You may have noticed patterns that were hard to explain. Moments where they seemed close, almost fully present, only to pull away without warning. Times when they would reach out in small, indirect ways and then disappear again before anything could develop into clarity. You may have felt drawn in, then pushed out, left questioning what was real and what was not. And the most confusing part was this. Whenever you began to step back, whenever you stopped reaching or trying to understand, they would reappear, as if something in them reacted the moment your attention shifted away. This is not random. There is a psychological pattern beneath it, something that unfolds when a person begins to lose control over how they feel. And what you are experiencing fits that pattern more closely than you might realize. Because the moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop trying to close the distance or explain the connection, something inside them changed. Not because they stopped caring, but because they suddenly felt the possibility of losing you. And that feeling does not create clarity. It creates tension. When someone begins to feel emotionally exposed, the first thing that often happens is not openness, but defense. The ego steps in not to connect, but to protect. Instead of expressing what they feel directly, they create space. They become less available, more distant, sometimes even confusing in their behavior, not because the feeling is gone, but because acknowledging it would mean losing a sense of control they are not ready to give up. Admitting love or even deep emotional attachment requires vulnerability, and vulnerability to someone unprepared can feel like risk. So instead of moving closer, they move sideways. They test the distance. They observe. They reach out in ways that are small enough to retreat from if needed. And in doing so, they create a dynamic that leaves you questioning everything. But underneath that confusion, there is something else happening, something less visible, but more important. When a person cannot fully accept what they feel, they often project that confusion outward. They shift the emotional weight onto you. They make it seem as if you're the one who is too invested, too sensitive, too attached. And for a moment, you may even believe it. You may start to question your own perception, your own intuition. But what is really happening is not that you feel too much. It is that they feel something they do not know how to handle. Carl Jung described this through the idea of the shadow, the part of the psyche that contains everything a person has not yet accepted about themselves. And when you entered their life, you did not just interact with who they consciously believe they are. You touched something deeper, something hidden, something they have kept out of awareness. And when that happens, it creates a reaction that is both attraction and resistance at the same time. There is a part of them that is drawn to you, not just because of who you are, but because of what you reflect back to them. In your presence, they feel more like themselves, more open, more alive. But there is also a part of them that resists this, because it brings them closer to aspects of themselves they have spent years avoiding. And this is where the contradiction begins. They move toward you, then away from you. They connect, then withdraw. Not because the feeling is unstable, but because they are. Take a moment and place your hand gently on your chest. Feel the rhythm beneath your palm. That steady movement is something your body has always known how to trust. In the same way, there is a part of you that has always known the truth of this connection, even when your mind tried to doubt it. Your body felt the difference. It recognized when something was real, and that recognition matters more than any mixed signal you have tried to decode. Because what is happening here is not just about behavior. It is about something deeper, something rooted in how human beings respond to emotional exposure. When someone begins to feel attached in a way they cannot control, a specific kind of reaction can emerge. It is not always visible as love. Sometimes it appears as inconsistency, as hesitation, as distance. But underneath it, there is a fear of losing something that has already become important. And this is where a shift begins. When you stop chasing, when you stop organizing your attention around them, the dynamic changes. You're no longer trying to reach them from a place of need or uncertainty. You become still, and that stillness creates something unexpected. It creates space. And in that space, their own emotions become louder. They begin to notice your absence, not just physically, but energetically. They feel the difference in your responses, in your presence, in the way you no longer lean forward in the same way. And instead of bringing them clarity, this creates a form of internal pressure, a kind of attachment tension that was not there before, because before they could rely on your consistency. They could feel your attention without having to fully confront their own feelings. But now, that certainty is gone. This is what can be called attachment panic. It is the moment when someone realizes, consciously or not, that the emotional dynamic has shifted beyond their control, and their response is not always direct. They may check your presence in subtle ways, watching, observing, noticing what you do, how you appear, whether you're still available in some form. They may reach out briefly, then withdraw again, not because they are playing a game, but because they are trying to understand what has changed. Touch your wrist for a moment, feel your pulse. Notice how it continues without effort, without force. That rhythm exists whether you focus on it or not. And in a similar way, what they feel has continued beneath the surface, regardless of how they have tried to manage or suppress it. Feelings like this do not disappear simply because they are not expressed. They shift, they hide, they become indirect, but they remain. When your energy changed, something in them reacted to that shift, not logically, but emotionally. And emotional reactions are rarely clean or predictable. They create behavior that looks inconsistent from the outside, but makes sense when you understand the internal conflict behind it. Because now, they are no longer interacting with a version of you that is reaching toward them. They are facing a version of you that is grounded within yourself. And this is the part most people misunderstand. What looks like testing, distance, or inconsistency is not always manipulation in the way it appears on the surface. In many cases, it is the closest thing to a confession that fear allows. Because when someone does not feel safe enough to be direct, they do not stop feeling. They simply change the way those feelings are expressed. What you experience as mixed signals is often the language of someone who cannot yet speak clearly about what is happening inside them. So when they send something small, something casual, something that could be interpreted in multiple ways, it is not random. It is controlled vulnerability. It is an attempt to reach without fully exposing themselves. They are not testing whether you care. They are testing whether it is safe for them to care openly. And that distinction changes everything. Because it means the behavior is not about playing with your emotions, but about protecting their own. If they truly felt nothing, there would be no need for this. No hesitation, no checking, no indirect communication. Indifference is simple. It moves forward without looking back. But what you're witnessing is not simplicity. It is conflict. It is someone caught between what they feel and what they are ready to admit. And if you could hear what is happening inside them without the filters of pride or fear, it would sound very different from what they show on the surface. It would not sound distant. It would not sound detached. It would sound uncertain, conflicted, and at times overwhelmed. Because what they are trying to manage is not the absence of feeling, but the presence of something they did not expect to carry this long. They remember more than they show. They replay moments they have never mentioned. They think about conversations that seemed ordinary at the time, but now feel significant in ways they cannot explain. They recall the way you listened, the way you responded, the way you made space for them without forcing anything. And those memories do not disappear. They stay active, especially in quiet moments when there is nothing else to distract them. This is why their behavior does not fully align with the idea of moving on, because part of them has not. Even if they try to convince themselves that they have, even if they fill their time with other things, there are still moments when everything becomes quiet enough for the truth to surface. And when it does, it is not subtle. The body reacts before the mind can organize a response, a tightening in the chest when something reminds them of you, a pause when your name appears unexpectedly, a shift in their mood that they cannot immediately explain. These are not deliberate reactions. They are automatic, and they reveal something that is still active beneath the surface. At night, this becomes even more visible. During the day, it is easier to maintain control, to stay occupied, to avoid thinking too deeply. But when everything slows down, when there are fewer distractions, the mind begins to return to what has not been resolved. And in those moments, the connection does not feel distant. It feels present, immediate, real. They may not say this out loud. They may not even fully admit it to themselves. But the experience is there. And over time, that experience creates pressure. Because avoiding something does not remove it. It only delays the moment it has to be faced. This is why their actions may seem inconsistent, because they are moving between two internal states. One that wants to maintain control, to stay distant, to avoid vulnerability, and another that feels the pull of something real, something unresolved, something that continues to exist regardless of what they decide to do with it. And this brings us to something important. The shift that has happened is not just in them, it is in you. Because while you were trying to understand them, something else was happening beneath the surface. You were changing, slowly, quietly, without needing to announce it. You began to step back, not in a reactive way, not as a strategy, but as a form of self-preservation. You stopped trying to interpret every signal. You stopped waiting for clarity that was never directly given. You stopped organizing your emotional state around their behavior. And that shift matters more than anything they are doing, because it changes the entire dynamic. You are no longer responding from uncertainty. You are no longer trying to maintain a connection that was not being clearly held from both sides. You are standing in a different place now, a place that is more stable, more grounded, more aligned with yourself. And if you recognize this change, even slightly, hold on to it, because it is the most important part of this entire process. It is the moment where your focus moves away from trying to understand them and returns to understanding yourself. And if this resonates with you, even in a small way, acknowledge it, not for them, but for yourself. A simple recognition: I am the shift. Because you are. You are no longer the version of yourself that needed constant reassurance to feel secure. You are no longer the version that waited for someone else to define what something meant. You have moved into a space where your own awareness matters more than their inconsistency. And that is not something small. That is a fundamental change. When you stop chasing, when you stop trying to hold something that is unclear, you create a form of stillness. And this stillness is often misunderstood. It is not coldness. It is not indifference. It is not a way of withdrawing to create a reaction. It is a natural result of no longer forcing something that is not being met with the same level of clarity. And this stillness has a powerful effect, because it removes pressure, it removes expectation. It removes the dynamic where one person is constantly reaching while the other remains undefined. And in that absence of pressure, something else becomes visible, not just to you, but to them. They begin to experience the connection without the constant availability they had before. They begin to feel the difference between a version of you that was always there and a version that is now simply present, but not waiting. And that difference creates awareness. It does not guarantee action. It does not guarantee clarity from them. But it creates the conditions where they can no longer ignore what they feel as easily as before. And this is where the real understanding begins. Because this situation was never only about whether they would come back, or what they would say, or how they would act. It was about what this experience revealed in both of you. For them, it revealed feelings they were not prepared to face. For you, it revealed the importance of your own boundaries, your own sense of self, your own emotional stability. And that is the part that stays with you, regardless of what they choose to do. You are no longer waiting to be chosen. You are no longer trying to prove your value through patience or understanding. You are no longer explaining your worth to someone who cannot fully meet it. You have moved into a space where your presence is enough, even in silence. And that changes everything. Because from this point, your decisions are no longer driven by confusion. They are driven by clarity. You're not reacting to their behavior. You're responding to your own understanding of what you deserve, what you accept, and what you no longer participate in. And that is where real power exists, not in controlling the outcome, not in predicting what they will do next, but in being grounded enough that whatever happens, you remain aligned with yourself. So whether they reach out again, whether they remain distant, whether they eventually find the courage to express what they feel or not, the most important shift has already happened. It happened in you, and that is not something that can be undone. If this message reflects what you have been experiencing, share it with someone who may still be trying to understand the same pattern. And if you want to continue exploring these deeper psychological dynamics, stay connected, because there is always more beneath the surface than what first appears. But for now, remember this. You did not lose yourself in this. You found yourself.